Support for living and learning with disabilities comes from Living Innovations, providing support for people with developmental disabilities to have a good life at home and in the community. Services include Community Connections, which facilitates employment, skill development, and community integration to maximize each individual's well-being and independence. For more information or to learn about job opportunities for compassionate people wishing to do meaningful work, visit livinginnovations.com. And by the Natural Care Wellness Center, which has been serving the New Hampshire and Maine seacoast for 22 years. Our goal is to encourage a healthy lifestyle through education, wellness choices, and hands-on healing. Natural Care Wellness Center offers gentle force chiropractic, family and child wellness, chiropractic acupuncture, holistic nutrition, nutrition response testing, a decompression table, therapeutic exercise, whole food supplements, neuro-emotional techniques, and massage therapy.
Welcome to Chloe's Shred Shed. I started this small business because I love shredding. I am proud to provide a valuable service in my local community. Being an entrepreneur made it possible for me to keep working during the pandemic. I like working and having a purpose.
Sometimes we miss all those wonderful qualities that we just listed in that last song because we decide who people are before we even get to know them, based on maybe what they look like, how they talk, what kind of clothes they're wearing, what kind of music they like, whatever. We decide who they are before we ever get to know who they really are inside. And it happens to us too. Sometimes people decide who we are before they know us. I think all we really want is just for people to see us for who we really are. See me beautiful, look for the best in me. It's what I really am, and all I wanna be. It may take some time, it may be hard to find, but see me beautiful. See me beautiful, each and every day. Could you take a chance? Could you find a way to see me shining through in everything I do and see me beautiful? See me beautiful, look for the best in me. It's what I really am, and all I wanna be. It may take some time, it may be hard to find, but see me beautiful. See me beautiful, each and every day. Could you take a chance? Could you find a way to see me shining through in everything I do and see me beautiful? Allison Decker.
The guest we have today is someone that I know a little bit, Amy Beauregard. She's my daughter, and we have Pamela Sollenberger and Wendy Chase with us. Ronnie, this is we're taping this on January 17th, and we have a storm, and he's lost his power at his house. If he should come back on, we'll sign him in. But otherwise, we're going to move ahead and do with it the program. And I guess, Amy, probably start with you. If you'd like to introduce yourself a little bit and tell people about you and begin your story, and we'll just jump in and ask questions and go for it.
Okay. My name is Amy Beauregard. I have two boys. I have a almost 14-year-old and I have an 11-year-old who is Alec, who I'm going to talk about today. I'm also a public school teacher. I teach fourth grade in the city that we live in Dover, and was fortunate enough to have Alec go to school with me from kindergarten through fourth grade, the same school, because I teach in the city that he would have attended. So my story, we were talking about, the topic is epilepsy for today, but it's funny because our story didn't start that way. Alec was, I had that mom intuition the entire time I was pregnant. I kept asking my OBGYN to keep looking at my ultrasounds because I just felt like something wasn't right. And I said, can you just take another peek at them? The last one I had was at like 16 weeks or something. And they just kept saying, nothing's wrong, everything's fine. And people would congratulate me for being pregnant. And I just didn't even, I felt like I couldn't even say thank you. It was a really, really weird feeling. Flash forward to 3 weeks before he was due, he was very breech, and I went into labor, and they did an emergency C-section, and they pulled him out. His head was huge. It did not look normal. I didn't know anything was wrong until I saw my husband's face, and then I knew that was definitely, there was an issue. They took him right away to Boston Children's. I didn't get to hold him. They needed to take care of him. So when he got to Children's, they realized that he had hydrocephalus, and that he had a brain malformation called Dandy Walker, a very rare brain malformation that affects the cerebellum, the vermis, which is a part of the brain, and also usually you have a cyst of some sort in your brain, and hydrocephalus would be the fourth qualification for the brain malformation. So that was determined, and at 3 days old, he had a procedure where they drill a hole into the brain to try to drain some of the fluid that had built up. And he was, in the NICU down in Boston, and we were traveling back and forth at the time because Children's does not have a place for parents to stay. So he came home intermittently, but I had nurses coming in and measuring the size of his head, and it was determined that the hydrocephalus was not resolving with this procedure, and they placed a shunt at 3 weeks old. He came home, developed normally for the most part. We had some early intervention that came in, lots of monitoring of his head size. So the seizures really wasn't something that was on our radar. He would have these little episodes where like one time he came out of the bath and he was covered in goosebumps. He would smack his lips. So almost like he had like dry lips. When he started talking, he would talk kind of gibberish. You wouldn't really know what he was talking about. He would mumble, and his eyes would flick almost as if he were reading. Obviously wasn't reading at the time. And we didn't know what was happening. We didn't know they were seizures, because to a typical person, you would think a seizure would be shaking or a continuous movement, So the first time we knew something was really, really wrong. This probably wasn't the first time, because I have to tell you, when I look back at him being an infant, I would go in to pick him up in the morning from his crib, and his crib would be covered in vomit. He would have thrown up in the middle of the night and didn't wake up. And as we started to know what his seizures were like, vomiting was always part of that. And so I suspect he had had seizures well before we were aware, while he was sleeping.
Wow.
So the first one, at about a year and a half old, we had called the ambulance. We had to, basically anytime he had a seizure, they were lasting too long. They were lasting longer than 5 minutes. And that's not good for your body systems. Things start to shut down after you seize for too long. And so when we were going to the ER for attention, we didn't know what was going on, and neither did they. And that was, the first struggle with this. He's having complex partial seizures. So he's awake, he's alert, he can talk to you. It might not be, might not make sense, but it wasn't he wasn't falling on the floor, he wasn't shaking, he wasn't losing consciousness for the most part. So we were kind of fighting with the ER, telling them something wasn't right. And there was a situation where I think it was the second time he had a seizure. We weren't really sure what they were, brought him to the ER, and they didn't treat him properly. And they ended up having to intubate him. And while they intubated him, one of his lungs collapsed. At this time, he was just 3 years old, and they ended up having to med flight him to Children's. So, the beginning of this, trying to identify what this was really difficult. We got to the point where we did get a rescue medication for him, but the most challenging piece of this whole thing was identifying when he was having a seizure. And my mom and dad would take care of him, would babysit. I stayed home for a year and a half from work because daycare wasn't probably going to be the best situation for him. And even with people who knew him well, it still was this guessing game. Is this a seizure? With basic eye movements and lip smacking, was really hard to identify. He went from 2014 to 2019 without any seizures. He was put on an anti-seizure medication called Keppra. We suspected it impacted his behavior a little bit. He was a little quick to react, didn't always react as you would expect somebody to react. We did a little bit of play-based therapy with him for his behavior as well. But he didn't have seizures during that time. And in 2019, things really started to kick up. And at this point, he had been through different medications that his seizures were looking a little different. So we moved away from the lip smacking, and the eye movement has always kind of been there, but he was always vomiting, and now he can talk, right? So he's able to tell you that something isn't right. And it was really helpful for us as he got older, because he at one time, we were walking out to the playground at school to go to, we used to call it morning movement, which is morning recess. And he said to me, "I feel like I'm in a dream." That was the first thing that came out of his mouth. And then the seizure happened. And that was the first time that he exhibited that there was some sort of aura associated with a seizure coming on. So he now has developed into seizures where he can tell you, I'm having a seizure, which has been tremendously helpful for us trusting people like the school system, and him going on play dates, that type of thing, because he needs to be rescued from many of these seizures. They tend to last longer than 5 minutes. Let's see. Our experience, we are very, very thankful to live where we live. Boston Children's has been incredible. We have an amazing neurosurgeon. His name is Dr. Worf. If you know anybody in the field of neurology, you know that it's very hard to find a doctor who has a great bedside manner. They're very smart, they're very knowledgeable, but neurologists and neurosurgeons often aren't, people that you feel like you could go for a drink with. Dr. Worf, he's the kind of guy that I picture being a wonderful grandfather, a wonderful father. He just has an amazing bedside manner and has done 2 out of the 3 brain surgeries that Alec has had to have. And just the care that we have received at Children's has been incredible. Right now, the most recent development in this epilepsy story is that Alec has been through 5 classes of medication. And my understanding is there's only a few more. They get dirtier as you go through the classes where they impact brain function a little bit more, and they start to get into more of the mental instability type of drug class. So our neurologist recently told us that because he's already gone through 5 and they're considering them failed trials of medication because he's still having seizures, even though he's completely medicated, that your percentage of the next class actually being effective goes down to under 10%. So at one point he said there's basically like a 6% chance that the next class will even work if you try it and it's really dirty and it could cause some other issues. So we have started the process of surgery, looking to see if he's a candidate for surgical intervention. That process is a lot more intense than we originally thought, but it's called resective surgery. And Alec has been through 4 tests already that will help this team of doctors through Children's. They meet in a conference format twice a week to determine whether he is a candidate. The most recent, he had a functional MRI a week ago, and also his neuropsychology testing that if he does have surgery, they will repeat 6 months after the surgery to see if any of those cognitive abilities, specifically, well, I'll tell you where the surgeries, where the seizures are coming from, because it impacts language, emotions, a lot of that. But anyway, he had what's called a VEEG. So he's had a lot of EEGs where they just put the electrodes on your head and they're just monitoring for seizure activity. But this one was a video one. And he was at Children's for 6 days and 5 nights where he was taken off all of his medications, and they monitor him. They can hear everything happening in the room and they can see everything happening in the room. It was a bit of a slow start. We were admitted on a Friday, and it wasn't until Monday early in the morning that he had his first seizure, which was over 10 minutes before they intervened. But within 48 hours, he had 11 seizures following that they were able to record. And we were hoping for between 2 and 3, and to have 11 that were recorded gave them a lot of information. And that doesn't happen to a lot of families and a lot of children that go through that procedure. So we had thought, because one of the newer symptoms now that he has, and we now know is a seizure, is he loses his peripheral vision on his right eye. And he'll tell you, I can't see out of my right eye, and we know that we intervene with medication. He also feels sick to his stomach, but that's like, for me, that's the indicator that this isn't just a small one, this is a big one. And what they've determined in the EEG is they thought that they were coming from his left occipital lobe, which is the one in the back, and that impacts your right vision because the right eye vision was going with each of his seizures. But what they determined through these, monitoring these 11 seizures is they're actually starting in the temporal lobe. And that's the lobe that's responsible for language and emotions, and they spread. So they almost take over the entire left hemisphere of his head when they get to the point that they said within like 2 minutes, they've taken over the entire left side of his brain. And that's why his vision is impacted, because it will go to the occipital lobe. That sounds frightening and terrible, but it was really good information, because if they were starting in the occipital lobe, it's not something we would probably have, surgery would not have been something we would have gone for, because he could very well have lost his vision. They told us that he could have gotten tunnel vision, and he would live with that. And so that's not something that we wanted to touch. But knowing that it's coming from the temporal lobe, we have a little bit more leeway. So that was really excellent information. And the functional EEG that they did also helped to determine what parts of his brain he uses for certain tasks. He's lefty. So they were wondering if, I don't know if you've ever seen that if you're a left-handed person, they say you're right-brained, and if you're right-handed, you're left-brained. I haven't gotten any information from the functional EEG yet that I can read. I mean, you get the report, you have no idea what it says. So I don't know whether he's still dominant on his left side, even though he's left-handed, because that would be impactful too. Because if we're talking about removing a piece of the brain from the left side, and that's his dominant side, you know, we could be in it more than we anticipate.
Yeah.
So that's where we're at right now. I was trying to get him to make an appearance, but he's old enough now that he's embarrassed. And I think anybody that lives with epilepsy, it can be embarrassing. You don't know when they're coming. You don't know what's going to happen when they come. You don't know who's going to be there to take care of you. Alec and I are the best of friends because he doesn't want to do much without my husband or I there, or somebody he trusts. He trusts my parents and my in-laws, but it's tricky. It's tricky because it can be very embarrassing. So that's where we're at with Alec, and that's our story.
Oh my goodness, Amy, what you've been through has been incredible. How have you coped with this?
You know, everybody tells me, so people who know me, people at work tell me that I have a very calm demeanor. I guess if you know me a little better than that, you know that I talk really fast and I'm a little bit louder, much louder than, some, but I try to maintain calm and take things as they come. I don't overreact. I don't want to overreact for Alec.
No.
I don't want to overreact because I think you kind of learn that you don't know how things are going to turn out. I do think that I probably could do better at taking care of myself and maybe not being as, perceived as strong as I am, but I think that's kind of the role that I have to take.
Right.
You have to be the one that's level-headed, and you have to be the one that's strong. And I feel like for Alec, who is nervous and worried and anxious, I mean, he goes to bed sometimes and says, what if I don't wake up? He knows, and he's scared of death. So you can't be the one that loses it when he says something like that. You have to be the one that is reassuring, and everything's going to be fine, even if you don't think so.
Right. Oh my goodness.
May I have a question for you, seeing our stories are not similar, but in a way, but the part, as you were saying, that you're the one that has to hold it together and kind of take care of everybody. When Aaron was really ill and going through chemotherapy, I think the thing that bothered me the most, or would make me so frustrated and tired, was it seemed like people didn't really get it. I'm going to say my in-laws. So every single time, I mean, she was in the hospital every month for 5-day round of chemotherapy, bottom out, which means her counts would go low. She would end up with an infection, and we'd end up back in there. So we were home maybe seemed like 3 or 4 days a month. And every single time they would say to me, oh, we thought she was done. You mean she still has to go back, and to try to have to re-explain it over and over and over. And teaching hospitals, which Children's Aaron was at Mass General. And again, I got to a point after a few years of, no, I really don't want to have to go through the story again. It becomes like the ball and chain, you're just dragging all the time and trying to keep that happy face, and not letting your child know how scared you are and how worried you are. And I'm worried, are you going to get up tomorrow? But I would never say that. I found myself, and this has always bothered me, I've talked to Pamela about it, I think when Aaron was diagnosed and we didn't know if she was going to survive, and she ended up surviving 34 years, way out of what anyone thought. I was always in the back of my mind prepared that I was going to lose her anytime. And I know I tended to become much more clinical with her than that loving mom. I don't even know if that's making any sense here. I was always kind of a little standoffish. I was afraid I was be hurt, that I knew I was going to lose her, and I just didn't know what to do about it. I still deal with that all the time, and wonder if she felt that. And I don't know, do you ever feel that, where you've got that line of being a mom and loving this child to death, but that clinical this is a reality. This is what we have to deal with every day. It's exhausting.
Yeah, I guess I don't have the second piece of what you said as far like, Alec could die from a seizure, but it's, the interventions that we have in place and yes, it's a possibility, but it's not like the end result, right at this point. So it's a little bit of a different perspective that way. But as far as like feeling exhausted about telling the story, I don't. I think that's I think that's why a lot of people think that I've got this calm way about me, because I don't talk about it. I don't go to work and say Alec had a seizure last night and was on the couch all like I don't know if that's a fault or not, but I think people don't know enough about the story. And Pete and I always talk about how this stinks, and we don't know why this happened to us, but I can't leave him home alone. So all of our neighbors, all of the kids are the same age, and I've got a 14 and an 11-year-old. They should be able to be home by themselves for an hour so I can go to the grocery store. I just can't do that. And so there's some freedoms also that we don't have that other people do, but I don't talk about it, or I don't complain about it, or, once in a while I'll reach out to a neighbor and say, are you going to be home? And again, I think it's different too. I think our stories are different because Alec looks like a typical child. He acts like a typical child. So I think there's some differences with that too, because people aren't questioning me. Because if you didn't know anything about his history, you wouldn't know to ask, I guess. So I think that's a different piece too.
Oh, definitely, definitely. Because a lot of people don't know that they have any kind of seizure disorder until they see it presently, in person.
Yeah.
I've had more EMTs come and get me, particularly when I was teaching a class at UNH, and I was totally embarrassed. Yeah. And as soon as they came, I came out of it. So it was very hard, I know, for the students. So they won't have me back, and I understand, Yeah.
I'd like to jump in here on a couple of comments. One, Alec is incredibly bright little boy when it comes to, he has skills that, well, he blows his grandfather away. I'll tell you, he comes over, computer games, and I don't just mean shoot 'em up games. I mean games that require some really good dexterity and thinking and strategies and so forth. And he'll bring his computer over and set it up on the counter, and they'll have a racing type of game. And he is all over me. I mean, I've lost the minute the thing starts up, and so I stop fooling around with the stuff, mostly to cover up the fact that I have absolutely no idea what I'm doing. And he's gotten all, but he just blows me away with his talent in that, and building things out of Legos. He does everything. I mean, all kinds of kits, puts them together, puzzles, 2,000 piece puzzles. He can sit at a table and he can find those pieces, and he builds. How many puzzles does he have, Amy, roughly?
We just cleaned out our game closet actually a couple days ago, and we probably still have 15, but I just lent some to the neighbor. So he likes the 1,000 piece. He prefers thousands.
Yeah, and Amy really encourages that, because she gives him a place to work. And what do you do with the puzzles? Some of them you make them in so that he can.
Yeah, I Mod Podge them, and he wants to hang them in his room, but the reality is there's really not a lot of room to hang 1,000 piece puzzles on his wall. So
and so that's a really interesting talent that he has. I mean, I can't do it. I look at those puzzles. He immediately can find things and put them together. So he definitely has, there's parts of his brain that are highly developed, and I'm sure that that's going to benefit him. I was wondering, Amy, if you mentioned Dr. Worf, and I was wondering if you were comfortable talking about how he the special surgery that he did in the beginning with the shunt, and how that's so different from what it used to be, that he came up with a special seizure, the special treatment that he came up with that was
Are you
unique.
talking about the very first ETV that he had first? That's
Yeah,
probably.
when he put the tube in and it uncoils and all that.
Oh, well, maybe because people don't really know how the shunt works, but the first procedure he did at 3 days old is a newer procedure that sometimes prevents kids from having to have the shunt, or even adults, where they drill the hole and they're just hoping that the cerebral fluid drains on its own. But when that didn't work, the shunt was placed, and the shunt is on his right side, so it's a very big bump. You can't see it over his hairline now, but when he was a baby, I remember walking through Walgreens, and this old lady, bless her, she came up and was mortified at what I had done to him. What did you do? What happened to him? I think she thought that he fell because he had a huge stitch, this long, and he had little infant head with no hair, and just some people who say things like that. Anyway, so it's magnetically controlled, so they can control it with a magnet on the outside of his head to adjust the flow. So you can have a really high flow of fluid or a really low flow. And the tubing runs behind his ear into his neck, and it goes down into his stomach. And because he was 3 weeks old at the time, little tiny baby, the coil, they put in enough coil, and he has a incision in his stomach too, because I think that must have been how they kind of pulled it down. They put in enough coil to extend with your height as you grow. So his x-rays were phenomenal because the coil went through his stomach, and it was just figure eighted, just sitting in his stomach. I can't believe he wasn't miserable. I just feel like that in your stomach when you're a little baby. But I just recently, we were in the ER in August. Alec had a seizure at night, and I didn't know it, and he woke up with a migraine, and I thought we were having a shunt malfunction. And we were in the ER, and they did an x-ray, and I saw the coil, and it's fascinating how much less now is in his head now that he's now 11. I mean, in his stomach rather. The other thing that they did, so the third surgery that they did, well, it's actually his fourth, because he had to have his shunt revised. It did clog, and they had to take out the catheter and replace it. The catheter is a piece that goes down into the brain. And when they did that, Dr. Worf did not perform that surgery. Not that he would have done anything different, but they did nick some pieces of brain matter when they put the new catheter in, and Alec woke up and could not use the right side of his body. He almost like he had a stroke, kind of fell to the right. He couldn't walk for days without me holding his hand. That was at 3 years old. So that was right around the same time we were med flighted. But he has something also to complicate matters, something called the slit ventricle syndrome, where his ventricles are now that the shunt has been placed and is draining the fluid, the ventricles it's like a full sponge versus a dry sponge. His ventricles are like a dry sponge, and it causes major migraines. And so they did place his shunt setting is on the highest setting, which means it's on the lowest flow. So it's less fluid is coming out, but they had to put in an anti-siphon device, which actually prevents even more flow of fluid from that shunt. And they did that in 2017. They added that piece, and since then he has not had the migraines that he had prior to that.
Great. Oh, that's great.
That is, Pat, if you remember, I don't know her name, maybe you remember, Pamela. I don't know if you were with us, Wendy, at the time, but the doctor who adopted the girl in China who was born with hydrocephalus, she's been on the show a couple times with a little girl, and she talked about how they didn't do anything for those children in China. And she was interning there or something and adopted this little girl, but she had a lot of disabilities because it was a long time before they were able to get her over into the United States, like a couple of years, and a lot of damage had been done to the brain. But this thing that Dr. Worf came up with, I mean,
they used to have, my understanding is, and Amy can correct me if I'm wrong, but they used to have surgeries over and over again as the child grew to put in a new shunt, because did not uncoil like this one does. As he grows, the tube grows, so it actually unwinds and grows with his height. But every surgery you have opens you up to a chance of some sort of infection or some other damage. And so this doctor came up with this new technique, and didn't he go, Amy, didn't he go to South Africa and everything to train doctors? Because in those countries, children that were born with hydrocephalus were just left off to the side until they died. They didn't pay any attention to them. And he's been over there in Africa, at least that's what I think it was, and training the doctors on how to save these kids and the procedure. So it was really, really amazing. The other thing I want to say, in credit to Amy and Peter, I have videos of the time when Alec was just a baby, and Amy and Pete, her husband, have always had expectations for him, treated him like he had no problems, when he was not going through a seizure, played with him, spent, all the time playing games and everything with him, just like his brother. And I look at it, sometimes it brings tears to my eyes when I see him when he was so little, and Amy was playing a peekaboo with him with a blanket, and he's got a blanket over, and she'd pull it off and he'd laugh, and she'd put it back and pull it again and he'd laugh. And she had treated him with expectations that he's just like every other kid, or he's gonna work to his potential. And I think that's to her credit and Pete's credit, and it's worked, because he is a polite, nice little boy, and so many things could have been different, and they've done a lot of work. He's got a problem, there's no doubt about it. But the pandemic didn't help. I mean, with having to be home from school, just like with other kids. The expectations, I mentioned that, and the med flights, how many did you take two, Amy, or was it one?
I think I remember one, but they've sent many ambulances for him.
This is the kind of thing that Boston Children's, I remember the med flight that they took him from Dover to Boston, and on a helicopter. And after he had gone into the hospital and they had treated him, the pilot invited him to come back to see the helicopter that took him down. And we've got pictures of Alec inside the cockpit, the helmet and everything else they gave him. Now, who would do that? I mean, that's the kind of thing that just was wonderful for them to do that. And he got the biggest kick out of that. He was inside that helicopter and he was going to fly it, but now his dad flies drones, so he kind of gets to do that. So let's see. Amy, would you mention something about the pumpkin party that you had, and then we'll show that video.
Sure. As part of the Epilepsy Foundation, they have a kids crew. My understanding is they're kind of putting a lot of that on hold for 2022, but as part of their, trying to bring awareness to epilepsy and the fact that there are a lot of kids that are impacted, they had like a pin, not a contest, but you could accrue pins for doing different things that would be bringing awareness to epilepsy to other people. And one of them was called the Purple Pumpkin Project, and purple is the color of epilepsy. And so they encourage kids to paint their pumpkins purple and to tell people why they want them to be on your front steps. So when somebody comes, if you're allergic or there's autism color, the teal ones or whatever, they want somebody to come to your door for trick or treat and say, why is your pumpkin purple? So Alec decided to take this on to earn this pin. And we, with the help of my mom, painted 20 pumpkins. We did it ahead of time because we were thinking about, you know, a bunch of 11-year-olds with a can of spray paint. It probably wasn't our best idea. So my mom painted all the pumpkins ahead of time, and we had all, she came up with all these kits for, you know, you could make a witch pumpkin or a zombie pumpkin, and the kids picked all their decorations. We did it outside. This was before everybody could be vaccinated in this age group, and they decorated them, and then the kids played outside, and it was great. They all took their pumpkin home, and we just asked that they tell somebody about how this impacts their friend Alec, and how it impacts other kids.
So, and I had the pleasure of videotaping that, and I'm gonna, I just made it into a 4-minute video. I got criticized by Alec. He didn't like the music. It repeats, I was trying to find something that I thought they would like, but anyway, I thought Glenn Miller was appropriate. No, I'm just kidding. Anyway, I will show it to you. We'll share it to you right now. Let's see. Okay. And here it is. And There, we're back. You've all been to the pumpkin party.
Oh, it was adorable. They
Yeah,
were
I
having a
love
lot of
that.
fun.
And tell them how nice you like my music.
Well, it's that first song. That first one is just, but the second one.
Yeah, and I can tell you that my wife was the one with the white hair. She was all dressed up and helping the kids out. But when she was here painting the pumpkins, we had them all spread out on the front yard on newspaper, and the neighbors were going by going, "What the heck?" All those purple pumpkins. And there was a lot of spraying, and Melanie was in a very strange mood for a few days because of the odor. She was
A
kind of
little,
high on
yeah.
the smell. I said,
Little
"Go
too
out and
much.
paint another
Well,
pumpkin."
then we got, yes.
Yeah,
That's funny.
really good. So anyway,
That's
that was
great.
fun to do that for the kids, and I appreciate that.
And for me, the purpose of doing something like that for him was to not be embarrassed.
Yeah.
It was an opportunity to have friends over. He loves to entertain. He is one of the most empathetic children I know. Like he wants to he's a people pleaser. He wants to make you happy. So this was his way of kind of showcasing something that was different about him without being embarrassed about it. Because I can have a party about it, and so it was. I thought it couldn't have gone any better, and it's something that I think he'll always remember.
Oh, I'm
Absolutely.
sure.
And
It's
and I'll just add one more thing there. He went down to Boston just a couple days ago, right? Amy, you went down there?
Friday, yeah.
And Thursday, yeah, it was an early appointment, so they went down the day before to stay overnight, so they could get into Boston without having to go through all the traffic in the morning. And I was on Zoom helping his brother trying to find a sound effect for a video that he was doing, and all of a sudden around the corner comes Alex's head, and he just says, "Hey, Grandpa," he says, "Goodbye." And I said, "Goodbye." And he says, "I'm going to Boston overnight." And I said, "Oh, okay, all right." And he always says this, "I love you, Grandpa." That's the last thing he says when he goes off, and he doesn't know how much that means because we love him a lot too. So anyway,
That's
any
beautiful.
any other questions that people have? or-
I do. Amy, I'm just curious with your son, Alex's brother. How is their relationship, and have you ever really had any issues with him feeling that the center is around Alex? And
Mm,
Yeah, it's a really good question because I think our oldest he's you have to have a certain personality, right? And I think he's got a personality where it works.
Good.
He's never he's an avoider. So if Alec has a seizure, you won't see Gavin. he's out of here. He definitely doesn't like to be around when things are traumatic,
Sure.
but he's never, I spend a lot of time with Alec. And going down to Boston and spending the night in a hotel. I'm sure Gavin would have liked to have done that, but it doesn't seem to be an issue. I think I convinced my friend here to come say hello.
Oh,
Can you
good.
say yeah. Hi.
Hey, how are you? Thank you so much for making an appearance today.
yes, yes.
What
He's
a
still in his
treat.
pajamas. That's what we get on a day off from school, right?
Yep.
That's okay.
You gotta come in
Staying
closer.
with mom.
Why is your thing so boring?
There you go. You gotta come in closer.
Good
Yeah.
morning, Alec. Did you just get up?
No, I've been up.
You've been
Don't you
up.
puzzle?
Okay.
What are you doing? What have you been doing?
Oh shoot.
Yeah. He's looking. That's how Dad went to work. So we're on our iPads.
Oh,
Yeah.
Right.
They just showed your purple pumpkin project video.
Yeah, that was great. That looked like a lot of fun. You should try to do that every year, every other year.
Yeah, I invited all my school friends.
they
And they
looked
look
like
like
they
they
were
had
having
a
so
ball.
much fun, Alex,
Yep.
and you were too. That was adorable.
Alec, they love the music. They absolutely love the music.
Grandpa told us she had a little issue with that, huh?
The music.
With the music.
I
Yeah.
did not like it at all.
Yeah, that was
Well,
the
maybe
beginning when I
next
was.
time
That's
he
so
can have his
annoying.
pick.
Yeah, all right.
It's
Thank
good
you
to
for
see
saying that.
you.
Yeah,
Oh,
okay.
oh, nice.
Bye,
Bye-bye.
Alex.
Bye, sweetheart.
Bye,
Have a
Alex.
good day.
Love you, Grandpa.
Bye-bye.
Ah, there it is.
Aw.
Love you, Grandpa.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Good that.
Yep.
Oh,
The other thing that you just touched on, that really good question, Wendy. Alec, Gavin is very athletic, and he's very good in all the things that he does, whatever sport he plays in. And that was something that both Amy and Pete gave Alec a chance to try out the sports too. I mean, and obviously because of some of the motor controls that he has, some of the problems, he can't quite go, he can't do as well as Gavin does, but he tried, he had the opportunity. And that's what I mean by what the expectations that they've put out are, you can try it, you can do what you want. And I'll tell you, they have a pool in the backyard, and boy, that's been another great thing, that they swim and dive and jump and have all kinds of fun together. And that's, I've got lots of videos that I take with special effects. When they jump into the water explodes and stuff like that. So they have a good time, and they've done
Yeah,
very
I do
well.
have to, thinking about it a little bit more, Pete and I have often said it would have been great if Alec was the older one, because Gavin doesn't have as much of an issue, or, there isn't, we just don't, if there is, he's not making it known, but Alec has a big issue with Gavin being older and being skilled, and it wears on his self-confidence a lot. So if Alec were the older one with this issue, and Gavin were the younger one, it would take away one of those factors for Alec, so that I feel like he's constantly trying to be as good as Gavin, even though we try not to put that pressure on him. But we're going to games all the time, and either he's staying home or we're dragging him with us, and it's just not the thing that he wants to do, and he's not good at, and he knows that. So I think maybe it's more difficult for Alec than it is for Gavin.
But you've given Alec an opportunity to use the skills that he has, like the Legos and the puzzles and the games and all that kind of thing too. So they're both lucky boys. That's for sure. That they have that type of an arrangement. So let's see. We've got about 2 more minutes. If anybody have any other questions or comments, or?
I have a question, Amy. Typically what they say when children are born with epilepsy, they will outgrow it by 18, but he had much more than that. So I don't know if that fits in that category for Alex or not. Did any doctor say that to you?
No, and there's so much unknown that they couldn't even give us a reason why he was seizure free for 5 years, and then now we have a big one every 3 weeks. We thought maybe it was like the beginning of puberty, but there is, from our understanding from our neurologist, who is actually part of the epilepsy department, so he's specialized in that. He does it. There's no rhyme or reason, and so we have not been told that.
I see. Okay, interesting. Yeah, there are so many ways, and they don't know. I mean, there's so much that's unknown.
Yeah. Well, if he does pass through the next phase of the surgery, process, the next phase would be a stereo EEG. They call that an SEEG, where they actually put electrodes on the brain itself. So they drill holes into the skull, and they put electrodes on the brain to really pinpoint where the seizures are coming from, and they have a robot that does it. The robot goes in because they don't want to touch blood vessels. They don't want to, you could cause a stroke. There's a lot of things that could happen. And then he sits with that for 5 or 6 days, but it's right on the brain. It's pretty crazy. They used to take the whole piece of the skull off back, years and years. When our neurologist first started, they took the whole piece of the skull off, put the electrodes on, and put the skull piece back on, and then you would go through it. And now they can do it through holes.
She
pretty
Oh
has,
my,
it is amazing.
Yeah.
oh my,
Still not pleasant and still very scary when you read about it, but
oh yeah.
compared, there's been a lot of work that's been done.
Amy, real quick, you were talking about the shunt and having the magnetic way of adjusting. Now, is that something, can you tell if the pressure's starting to get too high? And is it something you do at home? Or how often is he in the doctor's office to be able to look at those things?
No, they keep it at the same setting. Once they find one that works, they keep it.
Okay,
But I did, he can't have an MRI without having the
right,
tool
right.
that can
Sure.
reset it.
Yep,
I learned that the hard way in August when they were rolling him in at the hospital to have the MRI. And I said, did you have that device to reset it? And it took 3 hours for them to call around to find out nobody had it. So
we've had that happen.
yeah. So no, they'll reset it and it always goes
Okay.
back to 2.5. Yep.
Oh,
So what do you do for care at home? Anything, I mean, meds, I'm sure, but are there things that you can work with? And if you know he's having a seizure, certain, I don't know, I had a lot of different things I could do, but it wasn't seizures. I'm not saying that. I just don't know what your medical expertise is now.
Yeah. I mean, I just have to make sure he has his medicines every
Okay,
12 hours is what they should be. And we also we know he's susceptible to lack of sleep, having seizures based on being overtired. So, he goes to bed at 8 and we limit keeping him awake, but I don't have to do anything with a shunt. I don't have to do any other things.
okay.
He has therapies. He goes to physical therapy for a cranial massage because his head kind of formed side
Yeah.
around the shunt. So he's got like a misformed head. But no, other than that, I don't have to do any interventions other than the meds.
Awesome.
oh my
Just
goodness.
love.
And
Lots
who,
of love.
who has
Another
the,
thing, Amy, is I go to an acupuncturist to reduce the seizures. Have you brought Alex to an acupuncturist?
I have
has
not.
really-
I actually
Yeah,
would love
I
to do
did
that
too.
myself.
Oh, you do that? Oh, good.
No, I haven't. I've always wanted to. I haven't done that. So that's an interesting idea.
Well, and they reduce them, we go with the duration, we go with the time frame and everything. But she knew that seizures, why they're developing is around the full moon. You can talk to any vet because the animals have a seizure during that time. It's a gravitational pull from the moon.
On TV.
What happens? And so she starts with that and she asks, okay, how many have you had? And I'll tell her and we go with that. She said,
Interesting.
okay, you've been seizure free for 3 weeks. And that was probably, yes, before I left. So that was probably in October. Yeah. So I'm still with her. She's wonderful. Yeah.
Great.
Yes.
where,
So I don't know if that's an avenue you would like, but
Yeah.
I'm glad you mentioned that, and I'll just tell Amy, we actually did on the radio. Ronnie went through an acupuncturist on the radio. Now, he was laying on a gurney, and the
right.
acupuncturist was putting the needles in between his toes.
That's
And
right.
Ronnie and I had a video camera, and we weren't on television at that time. We were just doing this on the radio, and there's a big microphone right over Ronnie's mouth, and he was describing what he was feeling while the guy was putting in the needles. And I'm looking right down on Ronnie with a camera, and Ronnie's eyes started to water when he put the needles in between his toes. And the acupuncturist said, is it painful? And he said, no, it's just I have to look at John Lovering's face. That's what's causing him to tear up.
Of course.
And yes, and on that, I'm going to say we're going to go to the outro, and I thank you, Amy, for being
Amy,
here.
Yes,
and-
thank you
and,
so much for sharing.
Thank you so much. What a delight to meet you.
Oh,
And
thank you.
Alex, I'm so glad he popped in so we
And
could,
Alex, oh,
yeah.
And
What a cutie.
we'll check with Ronnie and make sure he's okay, and I'll give him a call, and if he's got power. And we're going to share the final screen. You might want to watch this, Amy, and then I will end the recording. So thank you. And everybody else, it's February 8th for the
8th.
Fabulous Fine
Fabulous
group. Okay?
times.
All right,
Yep.
So thanks a lot. And just go
Perfect.
to this to And we got the outro coming up here.
If you cannot fly, if you cannot fly, if you cannot fly, I will lift you up and tell you that I love you. If you cannot fly, if you cannot fly, if you cannot fly, I will lift you up and tell you that I love you. As we travel through this life, there is trouble, there is strife, and some days seem dreary and so long. But with courage on our side, there's no need to run and hide. We can lift our wings and learn to fly. If you cannot fly, if you cannot fly, if you cannot fly, I will lift you up and tell you that I love you. If you cannot fly, if you cannot fly, if you cannot fly, I will lift you up and tell you that I love you. Now today may not seem bright, 'cause we cannot see the light, and there's thick black darkness all around. We can soar up to the clouds and ignore the angry crowds. We must lift our wings and learn to fly. If you cannot fly, if you cannot fly, if you cannot fly, I will lift you up and tell you that I love you. If you cannot fly, if you cannot fly, if you cannot fly, I will lift you up and tell you that I love you. And if fate will be our friend, there'll be peace around the bend. No more tears for us to cry. If you cannot fly, if you cannot fly, if you cannot fly, I will lift you up and tell you that I love you. If you cannot fly, if you cannot fly, if you cannot fly, I will lift you up and tell you that I love you.